So I'm going to hand over to Ingrid and Gavin, who are magnificent. They were part of our conference in November, and that was a very short one. So this is a little more in depth. It's taking it to the next level. Thank you very much, and welcome to the CCMG, guys. I will disappear and leave it to you.
Introduction, Sharon, and welcome everybody. We're so glad that you joined us. In the next hour, we're going to be talking to you about cultivating connection, and it fits in perfectly with what Sharon is saying. So GBV is a very scary thing, but what we're addressing is not only the scourge of violence, including gender-based violence, but we're looking at building morale, creating collaboration, all of which contributes to human happiness and fulfillment.
So when we undertake as a collective to instill in people the fact that they are welcome, the fact that they are valued, seen and admired as part of a vibrant community, and that what they feel and experience is believed and addressed together, then we start changing the trajectory of our society, and we really feel that's needed. But we're already getting ahead of ourselves in our level of enthusiasm.
So in the CCMG conference that we did at the end of November last year, we spoke about how gender-based violence is persistent, it's a worldwide problem, it's happening in every culture, all societies, it's not only here, and it's an underlying problem in societies that GBV is considered private, and therefore we actually turn a blind eye. So we look at GBV, why it happens, and what was driving the influence. Last time we also looked at the 8 steps which you can see. What we're going to be doing today is we're going to be unpacking some of these and giving you immediate, actionable ways to achieve greater connection and enhanced relationships.
So it's important to say from the outset that making people feel uncomfortable is the only way that things really change. Talking about gender-based violence, harassment, sexual violence, it's inherently uncomfortable for everyone. Talking about men's roles in these problems can cause men to be defensive, even if we're not perpetrators or abusers. And some of you may have been victims of violence, and some of you may have been the perpetrators of violence. What we invite you to do is just sit in the discomfort that you feel, the uncomfortable feeling that you have, feel these feelings, and then try out the tips and tricks we're going to give you and the information that we're going to share with you. So I'm not sure if you saw the most recent crime statistics that were issued last week by Police Minister Becky Chelly. These were related to October and December 2020. 3 months only. Murder and sexual assault cases year-on-year increased by 6.6%. Sexual assault cases on their own increased by 5%. Now, how's this number? 12,000 people were raped between October and December last year, with Chelly saying that most of these heinous crimes took place in people's homes, in the victim's home. Over 4,900 of the rape incidents took place at the home of the victim or the home of the rapist. 570 were domestic violence related, and 547 of the rape cases in this category involved female victims. 23 were male. It's not only about females, even though males are a very small percentage. So we view that homes across South Africa have become enclaves of cruelty, rape, and violence for women and girls that are trapped with family members that are abusive, and that there are few places to escape, and action is not being taken to help the victims. So we feel that we need to do more to address the root causes of gender-based violence in South Africa.
So some people might say that the gender-based problem is too complicated. And they're right, it is complicated, and the topic is currently dominating in the media. And it has been since the onslaught of Me Too. So recently we heard our President Cyril Ramaphosa say gender-based violence is a human rights issue. And he welcomed the 70 million rand boost that had been given in from socially aware and generous brands. Vodafone is one of those. And they have been particularly helpful in the launch of their app, which I mentioned last time, which is Bright Sky. They've got an incredible domestic violence toolkit that you can find online easily. And they've announced that they will be giving 2 weeks of extra paid leave to staff who suffer from domestic violence or emotional abuse. The problem is that's fixing what has already happened. How do we actually stop it from happening? So the situation is nuanced and it's complex, and we're going to keep it simple today. So whilst the topics of sexual harassment, domestic violence, and gender-based violence actually deserve separate slots, there is a similar emotional dynamic that underlies all, and that is the expectations and the stereotypes around men being strong, masculine, powerful, and the related but separate notion that women are less than and that we should obey. So this is a very simplistic argument that we're doing. Psychologists, Harvard, UN Women, and numerous other universities are on top of this research. They have done research in the last 18 months, and they know why we're seeing this increase of GBV. And we're seeing many programs being launched, again, to deal with the effects of the atrocities. We're also seeing new hashtags. So people think they're doing something, Me Too, Time's Up, Stop Abuse, why I didn't leave. And the thing is, the call to action now is different. Awareness and likes on social media, the corporates and government policies and procedures actually won't cut it anymore. We need to teach the skills necessary to affect change on a you and me level.
So much like hashtags are not really a solution, the hard skills that are being taught by corporates and universities don't seem to be doing the job either. MBAs do not seem to be equipping with people with the ability to be able to deal with this. And one of the most maligned sets of skills are those that are in a derogatory way referred to as soft skills, mostly to do with human interaction. So what we're not seeing enough of are programs that address the problems at the source, and you'll hear us refer to that often. There are a host of soft skills, beliefs, behaviors that need to be renegotiated and recalibrated. But how do we do that in both the corporate space and in the space of individuals? So we essentially believe in a three-step solution to the problem. We believe that we need to start by cultivating connection through being intentionally open and curious. Then engage in what is referred to as courageous conversations about bias, about belonging, and about equity in order to get to an understanding and action and change. The last two are critical because without action, we're just a hashtag.
So to unpack this cultivating connection a little bit more, when we cultivate connection with people through empathy and curiosity, and you'll hear curiosity a couple of times during this hour, we actually shift ourselves into something which is called high performance zone. And that high performance zone is actually a term that has been coined by research. It's not our own term. Our own term is cultivating connection though, and it's not about fluff and it's not soft skills. In a moment, we're actually going to be highlighting some research in terms of the hard bottom line benefits that inclusion is all about. So the key to success of utilizing the skills that we teach in cultivating involves the skills of building connection with others And also there's an understanding that there is value that others are trying to cultivate connection with us as well. And whilst this seems like a tiny thing, it's actually one of the most important aspects of dissipating violence. So, why would we even want to do this? I mean, it sounds hard and complicated and, well, because not only violence and harassment actually, but we're also increasing the diversity dividend, which improves everything.
So not sure if you've heard of the diversity dividend, but one of the reasons, and probably not the most important, but one that is almost all businesses are interested in hearing more about, is the diversity dividend. And essentially, this is a dividend you get from being a diverse organization. Deloitte's global diversity dividend is not the only body of research that found these kinds of benefits that an organization gets from being diverse and well-managed diversity too. So obviously an increase in productivity and personal performance within organizations, which then results in greater profitability, financial performance. The reputation of the organization externally increases as a result. Risk is mitigated as part of this process. Having more heads, more cultures, different types of thinking in a room improves and increases innovation. And as part of that, it increases problem solving. So this also results in greater collaboration, higher levels of trust, and obviously, once you have all of this, you have a higher level of morale in the organization, which comes from a sense of belonging and well-being. So these are all critical factors that any organization would want to have and more of. There is another consultancy that believes in the benefits of diversity dividend, McKinsey, and in their Delivering Through Diversity research report, they give us the required perspective, which is that a diverse workplace is one where a range of viewpoints and attitudes informed by a range of backgrounds contribute to the organization's success. So contributes, it's not the sole reason. The explicit and unambiguous commitment to building DEI, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion, has a direct impact on beliefs and values, as well as mitigating biases and stereotypes in an organization. So what does that do? This in turn has a cascading impact on harassment, on domestic violence, and on GBV as a whole. So this is where you come in. While organizations need to fund the work for this to be done in the workspace around cultivating connection and mitigating bias, you are the one that has to actually put this into action on a day-to-day basis. Organizations can't put this into action.
So being in a call center environment, you may have been told to stay curious instead of getting upset when a client is on the call. And good news is Harvard Business Review validates and agrees with this methodology. Front page. When we're in curiosity, we don't tap into our brain's old patterns and lazy ways of packaging and stereotyping things, which means our biased brain can't kick in. And when we're in a place of curiosity, our hearts and our minds are open, which means that we practice active listening because we want to listen rather than respond with the next good retort that we're wanting to do. So we want to empower you with some skills in the time that we're here together. And here is our first skill of this webinar. So take notes. When you're curious, we suggest that you ask questions that start with a what, not a why. So, and also always have this specific question waiting and to be asked at all times. The question is, what could be the reason why he or she did or said it that way? And keeping that top of mind is really key. So, notice how we started with this what, not the why. And let me give you a reason why. Because what keeps our brain searching for an answer, and it keeps our brain in curiosity. when we ask a question that starts with a why, it actually gives our brain an excuse or an option to go in a shortcut. And normally that shortcut is into judgment. So if we had to ask a question like, why did she do that instead? Our answer would be, well, because she's a cactus, a ant brain, or whatever you get it in terms of how your brain goes into judgment. So in curiosity, we invite connection. We cultivate connection by exploring perspective and seeking to understand. Asking questions with curiosity allows others to feel like we respect them, like we're debating their ideas rather than judging them for their ideas. So, by way of an example, let's take an example that's business focused. Why did you not meet your sales target? You can hear it in my tone as well, right? But even just those words, why did you not meet your sales target? It's a judgmental statement, and you can feel it and hear it. So if we use this tool that we've just taught you now, it would be something like, what got in the way of you not meeting your sales targets? And see the feeling? Now there's a conversation. Now we can actually cultivate connection, and we can make a difference and change the dynamic.
So, what is unconscious bias? Our brains have a natural tendency to sift, to sort, and to categorize information about the world. Find shortcuts and unconscious associations, beliefs, sometimes attitudes towards a particular social groups. And our brains collect all of this socialization, these experiences and learnings, and unconsciously packages these things together to enable quicker decision making. And this goes back tens of thousands of years. Enter the formation of stereotyping called cognitive biases. So cognitive bias is absolutely real, and everyone has it. No, seriously, we all have it. If you have a brain, you are biased. So while some people might like to believe that they are not susceptible to this, either biases or stereotypes, the reality is that everyone engages in the term, whether we like it or not. The important part about this is it makes us neither a good nor a bad person. It just is what it is, unless we change it or don't change it. So over the past decade, we have worked with individuals, teams, and corporate, both in South Africa and internationally. And in this time, we've seen the growing awareness of unconscious bias and the impact that it can have on behaviors and outcomes for businesses. So biases around the role of, for example, women in the home, the level of authority that women have in society, generally women's rights, and the rights and powers of men over them are all belief and value-based systems that feed into gender-based violence. So our approach is to help people and organizations develop a common language and a set of behaviors for dealing with biases in real time, as they're happening, in order to make more effective decisions for organizations. So social science research talks about and suggests that people tend to react with anger and irritation when confronted with their biases, particularly when those biases are accurately labeled. Now, isn't that just amazing? All that research to tell us something which should be common sense. Although these interactions may be unpleasant, and they often are, they also tend to lead to some form of behavioral change. And so these uncomfortable moments should be welcomed as opportunities for us to grow. Bias is a measurable condition. It's not a permanent one, however, for either the individual or the organization. So by acknowledging it, we can counter it, and we can expand and grow our pool of potential collaboration, and we can then improve financial performance within organizations.
So my favorite story around bias is from work in one of our workshops, and it's a story about the warehouse manager who actually clearly said to us in one of the workshops that he will not change his belief. His belief is that in his household, as a man, he will not step a foot in the kitchen. However, he did agree to remain curious, and he acknowledged that in the working environment, it was different. So he realized and acknowledged that actually women are capable of operating forklifts, something actually that he had never thought of before the workshop. 6 months after that workshop, he had recruited 3 women to take their tests for certification. And the organization now has women forklift operators. So I think the key thing here is that the willingness to openly recognize and tackle our bias is at the heart, and it's the heart of all our recommendations. When people choose to ignore bias or deny that it even exists, that's then when we keep seeking out business partners and team members and employees who share the same traits and look the same as us, and they miss out on the quantifiable benefits of diversity and, of course, inclusion. So, we're going to do a little bit of a test now. And this is, what about you? Or is it always somebody else, or is it something that you do in terms of bias? So, this is important enough to actually give some time to. Can you think of a time when there was some form of bias that got in the way of your progress or happiness? So it could be something around age, your skin color, your gender, your education. There's even people that are biased against overqualified people, MBAs. We won't hire MBAs. Okay. So this is your time. Think clearly, and we're actually going to go into uncomfortable silence. I invite you to get a pen or a paper, or just think about it. Think of a time where you experienced bias against you that affected your happiness or progress.
This is the uncomfortable silence part.
And if you want to put it in the chat, we'd actually love to, when you can think of something, put it in the chat and share some keywords, and we start the silence now.
Not sure that people often get silence in a presentation.
No, and I see some people typing.
And there are some people typing. So let's just give you another 10 seconds. Please feel free to share how bias has impacted you in some way. Your age, your skin color, your education, your race, gender, culture, whatever it might have been.
So keep typing. I think what's important to say is, unless we explore our biases, and are skilled up to work with these biases together, then things won't change.
So cognitive biases can be seen as the overarching definition of stereotype and of prejudice, because it is how we associate traits which are normally negative to a specific group of people. Let me give you a quick example of how quick and subconscious our stereotyping happens. There you are in a room, you need to move a heavy object. There are a number of women and men all around you, but the object is reasonably heavy, and you choose a man to help you move it. The decision is made that quickly, and sometimes stereotyping can help because you've decided to choose a man because the object is heavy. I'll give you another example. One of our clients had a female-only financial department of more than 10 people, and they had not realized that they were making selection choices based on their bias that women were better at detail-oriented work. So they weren't choosing men. They were in fact not even looking at male CVs. They were unaware of this, and after discovering it, they changed their employment search criteria and then selection criteria to change the gender balance in the finance department. It happened. Perfect example of selection bias. So let's explore our biases with the story of 3 cars. So what I'd like you to do is, if you can close your eyes and imagine this, it'd be fantastic. Otherwise, just go with what I'm talking about. 3 cars, the first of which is a battered old yellow City Golf. The second car is a mid-range Mercedes, black. The third car is an orange Lamborghini. We want to buy investment advice. Who are we likely to buy investment advice from? Well, our experience in doing this piece of work with multiple groups of people has been that very few people want to buy investment advice from the person getting out of the City Golf. Why? It's cheap and battered and old. What do they know about investing money? Very few people want to buy money from the Lamborghini driver, because what are they doing with their money? They are super flash. Can I trust them with my money? Most people, I'm talking about 70 to 80% of people, tend to go for the mid-range Mercedes driver because sensible, that's where I want my money to go. However, if I told you that the person in the battered City Golf was in fact driving his daughter's university car, and that he in fact also drove a mid-range Mercedes, that would change the picture. The point here being that we have cognitive biases that operate every single day in so many different ways that we are completely and absolutely unaware of.
Yeah. So as part of this and understanding our bias, we also think it's very important to have psychological safety. And if you haven't come across the term of psychological safety, essentially in a work context, it's the simplest definition is from Professor Amy Edmondson. And she says psychological safety is a belief that one will not be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns, and mistakes. So in our world, it is also means that providing a space for employees to be their full, honest, authentic selves. Actually, no one of us needs to or wants to leave part of our personality behind. And actually, with people working from home, we've got a clearer window into people's personal lives, and that should not result in any kind of negative repercussion.
So, to feel psychologically safe, we must know that we can be free enough sometimes to share the things that are scaring us without any fear of recrimination or victimization. We must be able to talk about what is messy or sad, and to have tough conversations with a colleague or a boss that may be driving us crazy. We can't just be focused on efficiency and expediency every single second of the day. We see how that has turned out for human beings.
So psychological safety is actually one of the biggest reasons why I will own it, and most abused people do not leave their abuser. And that's also the reason why they don't tell their employees what is happening at home. So when there is psychological safety, we can step in and address the situation. We had an example just this week, actually, which is a friend of ours who experienced a decrease in the sales productivity of one of his employees. And there was actually no obvious reason. It was when he created a safe space for her to talk to him, it became apparent that she was being verbally abused and actually that she was fearful. And this had leaked into her work life, as it actually most often will, and it impacted how she showed up at work.
we just do some quick feedback on what we got in the chat?
Yeah.
So one of the comments we got was, blondes are not intelligent, and I've dealt with this for years. 100%. The whole concept of the dumb blonde is something that plagues women that are blonde. It's ongoing, and it's weirdly inbuilt into people's psychology, and it actually comes from movies, and then it was made bigger and better by media in general.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of women definitely share that. So Lucinda, thanks for sharing that with us.
There was also one I saw scrolling up about body shaming, and that is definitely a bias. And what I find so interesting in the work that we have done, that it is not only about overweight people, skinny people face the same biases, short people, tall people. Just body shaming in general is quite hard to deal with.
I mean, my personal experience is one of my rebel things I did was the moment that I got my matric number, which is that number that allows you to write matric. This was a while ago. I went out and got earrings, which I've had ever since. Yeah. I am consistently judged as a man with earrings. I'm a little bit different now. At that stage, I had 4 in one ear and 1 in the other ear. But the point is that regardless of what my jewelry is, I'm not what you think that jewelry represents. So it's definitely, Sharon, something to do with men wearing earrings that upsets people.
So now actually is the perfect time to teach you skill number 2. So I accept that I'm biased. Actually, I'm not happy to admit it, but let's accept it. And let's say that I'm feeling psychologically safe. Okay, but what do we do now? And the most common way of telling somebody that you don't like what they're doing or saying is to call people out. I'm going to call him out is what we find. Our invitation actually is to call people in. And what is that? When we call people in, we're inviting conversation. We're not calling them out. We're coming from a place of, there's the word again, curiosity and openness, with the intention of listening and talking with an open heart and mind. So calling somebody in actually starts with a genuine, that's the thing, a genuine question that checks in on the facts about that other person's actions, words, rather than jumping into a biased conclusion. Calling in allows us to connect through dialogue, through exploration, rather than a disconnect, and blaming, shaming is what calling out does.
So that being said, we do find that occasionally calling out is needed as a response to something that is said or done, but it needs to be done in a particular way. An example of what people do, not saying that you should, in terms of calling out, is this is something we've experienced a lot, and I'll just give you an example of one of the odd handshakes that happens in the world. So I'm the man, and I'm shaking a woman's hand. I'm just making sure you can see this.
Yeah.
And men will hold a woman's hand like that as well in the handshake process. So let's use that as our example. The calling out way of handling that would be for a man to say, "Hey, dude, what did you just do? Why are you shaking your hand like that? That's sexist. So there's a calling out aspect, which is generally quite confrontational. The calling in would be more about asking the question, what, and saying, and very often it can be done privately. Sometimes it has to be done in front of the person in order to deal with the situation, but it can be done privately by asking a simple question like, so I'm curious, I saw that you were shaking Henriette's hand with 2 hands. Do you normally do that to women, or do you do that to men as well? In a very simple way, that will make the person think about what it is that they've done. Now, having done this enough, I can hear people going, but that's awkward, that's weird, that's strange, I can't do that to that person, etc., etc. So remember that those are all your excuses for not being open, honest, and authentic about what is happening to you and about drawing boundaries. Boundaries are critical for us to be able to have safe psychological spaces.
So we say speak up early and often, and we'll teach you another tool or two. Tool or two.
Yes.
Yes. Words matter. And language is really important. So calling in instead of calling out actually requires careful consideration of the language that is graceful and that is non-threatening. Language matters, especially when we're aiming to cultivate connection. Being aware of the need to use gender-neutral language is actually a good start. And what does this mean, gender-neutral language? Well, by way of an example, in an induction document or an induction presentation, when somebody says a leader should make sure that his blah, blah, blah has, I mean, what are you saying with his? Unconsciously. It would be a leader should make sure that they or them or whatever it might be, that's gender neutral. By way of another example, a question like, is there violence at home, would shut somebody down. A graceful, non-threatening way to ask about GBV would be something like, is there somebody in your life making you afraid? Or is there somebody in your life that's controlling what you do? And these questions are far more likely to get a useful answer that you can connect with.
So unconscious bias shows up and reveals itself in the use of our language. For example, even in the way that we speak, men tend to come first, right? Husband, wife, boy, girl, his, hers.
And I love the story, Sharon. You displayed it. Thank you for doing that early on in terms of us saying his and hers first. So when we launched this company, we were working with our website designer and we said to him, we started this company because hers needs to be first in what we're doing. 3 months into working with him on a regular basis, he was still saying his and hers, not hers and his.
So another example that we see within organizations is that you might unknowingly turn away female candidates by including traditionally male-biased language in job descriptions. Some words like competitive, aggressive, decisive, champion. These are gender-coded to attract men. The more we're aware of these biases, the less likely we are to let them color our impressions. We do need to understand that this sounds a little bit on the nitpicking side. Promise, this stuff is true, this works. We work within our clients' cultural environments and we contract language that is okay and not okay within those organizations. So by way of an example, is it okay in an organization, your organization, for somebody to say, hey, is it your time of the month? When they're irritable or teary. Is it okay for somebody to say, hey, dude, man, get a set of balls? Because these things are being said every single day in organizations, and these are most certainly not gender neutral conversations. If you know what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, then we will stay within those parameters. Then
Right.
we can create, yes.
We just had a lovely comment here, just to go with exactly what you're saying.
Go
Yes,
for it.
boundaries are the fine line between being happy and content and being angry because of the need to please other people, depriving the self.
100%.
100%, and it's definitely,
Yes.
you find we talk a lot about boundaries. Boundaries are one of the single most difficult things for people to set between themselves, particularly in a power disparity relationship. So between you and your boss, it's difficult to set boundaries. More often it's easier between you and a subordinate, somebody who reports into you, but absolutely, that comment's spot on.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we need to do when we create psychological safety is that one of the end results is that we build respect, acceptance, belonging, and engagement. And without those things, people won't have the self-confidence to talk the boundaries that the comment actually mentioned.
Yeah. So EBI, actually perfect timing with this boundaries thing. So thank you for whoever typed that comment. EBI is one of the easiest tools that we teach that first of all sets a boundary and second of all allows you to speak up early and often. So we teach a host of tools to use to build cohesion between genders. This EBI stands for even better if. So I wish that I had said to my first boss, Graham, It would be even better if you didn't keep telling me that my lips look kissable, as it makes me feel uncomfortable, and I really want to have a good working relationship with you because I can learn a lot from you. So,
okay, so now I'm going to pause there for a second, and we didn't rehearse this pausing. Can you imagine saying that to a woman? Can you imagine looking at a woman and saying, and this is a colleague, a work colleague,
true story,
and saying your lips look kissable? How completely inappropriate is that? And we know that it still happens.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And no, it's fine. Names have been changed to protect the innocent. Actually, they're not innocent, so their names haven't been changed.
So Graham.
Yeah, Graham. And Brian. So I actually wish that I had been able to say to a colleague at work, Brian, it would be even better if you didn't keep inferring that you want to sleep over by offering to cook me breakfast. It's not funny, and I like working with you, and I don't want to ruin that. So the script is name, when I saw whatever it is, or when I heard, it would be better, even better if, and this is where your boundary comes in, because the writer.
Just do that again.
So name, when I saw or heard, whatever it is, it would be even better if, and this is where you put what you're wanting, because, and the key thing here is that you actually talk about the impact of you, because nobody can argue with you when you say it makes me feel uncomfortable. No, you're not uncomfortable. Yes, I am. I'm uncomfortable. So that allows for conversation. The rider to this tool, however, is that don't do it when you're angry. Don't blame and shame and name the impact on you. The words even better if are specifically designed not to blame and shame. Yeah.
So the third tool we're going to talk about, and the final tool for today, is something called intention and impact, and it looks something like this. So when I heard or I saw what happened, the impact on me was it your intention too? Okay, so let's do by way of an example, and we'll just pretend that handshake example again, where I'm the handshakey, you be the man.
I'll be the man.
You be the man, and so we're shaking hands. And so I am the woman, and my feedback is going to be, so Gary, when you shook my hand before and you held my wrist with your other hand, I was taken aback by the physical contact, as I've never seen a man handshake that way before. And I wanted to check in with you, is that something that you do with men, or is that something only with women? And did you intend to treat me differently?
Oh, no.
8 times out of 10, the person that you're talking to will say, no, it wasn't my intention. And the end result is that you've spoken up, you've spoken a boundary, and that behavior will generally change. And we do say generally. A boundary has been set in a way that is reasonably comfortable for both of you, and you've now maintained that relationship, and that's part of everything we're talking about, because you want to be able to continue working together and, if possible, create a deeper understanding between the two of you and build a greater sense of trust.
Yeah.
So, to wrap up, what do we think that you can do to change the world? Because it's your job to help us change the world. Firstly, we think that if you remain curious at all times, tough call, but at all times, it will make a tremendous difference. When being curious, start with a simple question, which is what? What was the reason that? We think that understanding our bias and the bias of those around us, how stereotypes impact the way that we deal with others, is critical in order to allow us to make the changes. Remember, unconscious bias is just that, it's unconscious. It is a blind spot. So we need to check and recheck our intentions. We teach ways to have courageous conversations about bias, and there are connecting and disconnecting ways of doing that. For some of these things, don't try them at home or with your boss before you've practiced them. And that's our T's and C's disclaimer. The fourth thing is that words matter. Watch the language that you use. Check in on it, because whether you like it or not, it has an impact on everything that you do.
We spoke about creating a psychologically safe environment. And whilst it is something that an organization and leaders need to do, we challenge you to create a safe psychological environment within your community, within your home, within your friend circles as well, so that you can start having connection and conversations. So, the other one is learn the basic tools of effective human interaction. And how do you do that? Well, Hers&His has something called bias busting for business training. Come to our training and learn the tools. We've actually glossed over 3 tools this morning. We've taught you how to use what, how to say even better if, and how to use impact intention. Lastly, we invite you to be and create the change that we want. It's our job, yours and mine. So to close, we actually want to use a saying that we use from Simon Sinek all the time, and it's really important for us for cultivating connection. He says, fight against something and we focus on the thing that we hate. Fight for something and we focus on the thing that we love. Thank you for your time and attention, and we've given some time for questions.